Alright, today I'm going to do a large painting using a smaller plein air painting as reference. I'll be painting on a 24 by 30 inch canvas, and I've got my usual palette of colors. I plan on using an alkyd based walnut oil as my medium, and here is the painting I'll be using for reference. This is a 12 by 16 inch plein air painting that I did in a previous video. I'm sketching in burnt sienna today. I've got to work quickly because I'm actually going to lose the shade. When I paint at home, I prefer to set up in my driveway and just use my normal plein air setup instead of painting indoors. I like the light that I get outdoors. I guess it's partly because it's the way I'm used to painting, but I just really prefer being outdoors instead of in the studio. I don't spend a lot of time on the sketch, especially when I'm painting a fairly simple scene like this. And I'm not going to try to duplicate the plein air painting exactly. I'm going to use it as inspiration, just like I use the scenery as inspiration when I'm out painting. I want my paintings to feel spontaneous and not overworked. So part of the way I get that effect is by working quickly and not overthinking things, which is really helpful, especially when painting things like clouds and water. It's really good to keep things loose and fast. Got a mixture here of titanium white, alizarin crimson, and ultramarine blue, and I've thinned the paint a bit with odorless mineral spirits and the walnut oil. I have not used this medium in a long time, so it'll be interesting to see how I like it. I feel like the wave pattern is one of the most important things, at least to me. I've got a bunch of paint on my palette from a previous painting. I'm going to use this up before squeezing out more paint. Establishing the waves will also help clarify things for you guys because it'll be easier to tell what's going on. I just put a few lines to suggest the clouds and the mountains, and then I've got trees here in the distance, and you can see here there's a larger bit of white water in the foreground and then some breaking waves in the distance. I really do enjoy working on canvas. I think I do prefer it to working on panels, especially when working large. Working small on a panel makes a lot of sense because they're very portable and inexpensive, good for experimenting. But painting on a canvas is so nice. Okay, so there is the water pattern. Got a mixture here of ultramarine, titanium white, and burnt sienna for these distant mountains. Fairly dark in value. I actually want more saturation on these mountains than I'm getting on this first pass here, but it is the first pass, so I can boost the saturation if I want to. I mixed up a green here using ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow medium. I am going to add a touch of alizarin crimson just to warm up the green a bit. I'm actually really liking this walnut medium. It is a blend that I made myself using some walnut oil mixed with some walnut oil that has alkyd in it. Both of them are from M. Graham. And the reason I mixed them together was simply because both bottles were kind of empty or almost empty, and so I just mixed them together so I'd have enough. I mixed up another green using phthalo blue, cadmium yellow lemon, and just getting a bit of a variation into the greens here. And the mountains that are in the foreground are sort of a purplish gray color, mostly focusing on value at this point. And I'll be adjusting the saturation and colors. As you can see, I'm dragging some of the green into this color from the trees, but it doesn't really matter. Just trying to cover the canvas as quickly as possible, and then I can start refining the colors and values. I don't often do larger paintings for my smaller plein air paintings, but I'm thinking it could be a fun thing to do. I was inspired to do this painting simply because I like the smaller painting, but I want to have it larger so I can hang it in my house. And I find that 24 by 30 is actually a very, I don't know if it's versatile, but it's just a very useful size in the average home. When I do say a 30 by 40, it's too big to hang in a bedroom, at least in my house. And 16 by 20 is too small. Got cobalt teal and titanium white for the light portion of the sky below the clouds. There's a bit more of it over here. And I've got a mixture here of phthalo blue, titanium white, and ultramarine for the bits of sky that are a bit higher. I love painting clouds because you can just be so free and spontaneous. Basically just looking for interesting shapes. For the dark portion of these clouds, I'm using a mix that was already on my palette. It was the mix that I used for these hills here. I just added some titanium white to it. When I first started painting larger, I thought I needed to scale up my brush and use a much larger brush. So I think I was using a 2-inch house painting brush. And I did not like the effects that I got. So I decided to experiment by scrubbing in a larger painting using a smaller brush. And what I found is that it creates a much more interesting painting. Because you get all these sort of scrubby effects. I'm not saying you can't use a 2-inch brush. If that works for your process, then go for it. But for me, using a number 8 natural bristle flat to scrub in a painting like this, it works perfectly. And it's pretty quick too. I think I'm about 20 minutes into this painting so far, maybe 30 minutes tops. For the sand, I'm using a mixture of alizarin crimson, cadmium yellow medium, and ultramarine blue. I'm going to try to use as few colors as possible on this painting. I do like using a limited palette in order to maintain color harmony. I did break out the cobalt teal for that bit of sky, but it's not really necessary. I don't know if you can hear the plane that's passing, but I live near San Francisco International Airport. I never really notice the noise of the planes unless I'm filming a video. It's kind of quiet though today. It seems like less flights today than usual, which I'm thankful for, because it can get kind of loud. Got a dark green mixture here, still just using paint that's on my palette from previous mixes, creating a little definition in the waves. It's a joy painting on this size canvas. If you haven't tried it, I think you might be surprised. It doesn't take any longer, and in a lot of ways it's easier. I know I've said that before. I think there's an intimidation factor, and I definitely felt intimidated by larger canvases, but as I've said many times, they're easier in my opinion. For the light portion of the waves here, I've got a mixture of titanium white and cadmium yellow lemon. I'm going to try to leave little bits of the burnt sienna sketch showing through. It can be nice having those bits of orange in an otherwise blue and green painting. All right, so at this point, I'm about 40 minutes into this painting. The block-in is complete, and the next step will be to refine the colors and values. Looking at the reference, I can see that the trees and the hills are much darker. The dark portion of the water needs to be darker as well. So I've got a darker mix for the water, especially in the distance. And just like when I'm painting on location using a scene as inspiration, I am still stepping back frequently and looking for bits of magic. And when I say magic, I mean things that are unintentional bits of beauty that just happen in the process, in the spontaneous process of laying down the paint. I don't want to paint over those little bits of magic. And often we'll do that if we are too wedded, so to speak, to our source material. You'll often think, oh, that doesn't look like, you know, the hill. The hill doesn't look exactly right. And yet there may be something magical about the way you laid down the paint for the hill, but you're looking at it in a different way. You're not looking for magic, you're looking to reproduce what you're seeing. So I'm saying step back frequently and look for magic. All right, so here's what I finished up with. This painting took about 2 hours to complete. As usual, I will live with this painting before doing any touch-ups. I don't want to overwork it. That's something that can happen when painting from a static source like a photograph or a previous painting. There's not the sense of urgency that you get when you are plein air painting and the light is changing. So I try to fabricate that sense of urgency by painting quickly. I consider myself an alla prima painter. So almost all of my paintings, regardless of size, are completed in one session. I really like the walnut oil, so I do plan to continue experimenting with that. It worked out great. And as for the brush, the number 8 natural bristle flat worked for the whole painting. If you find painting large canvases intimidating, I highly recommend using one of your successful smaller plein air paintings as a reference because in that smaller work, you have already worked out compositional problems, color problems, and ended up with something successful. And so the chances are that you're going to have a successful larger painting. So I highly recommend it. Also, I do recommend trying painting outdoors. If you have a studio that you're comfortable with, that's fine. But for me, painting outdoors using my plein air setup for these larger paintings, I find is a crucial part of getting the results that I'm after. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. It's the Patreon support that helps keep me making these videos, and it's much appreciated. There's also a PayPal tip jar down below, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.